Okay. I never started at recording until now.
That's okay.
Okay. Oh, that's going to be quite a bit of backtracking.
Why don't do you want to just start with your story and we'll go from there and then just keep going?
Yeah, we can do that. That is kind of at the top of my document anyway. So yeah, I was kind of in the middle of covering some other cases, but I realized I haven't been recording this, so I'm gonna go ahead and start it over. I'm Nelson Jones with Trafficking Insights, and I'm here with Hannah Arrowood today of Present Age Ministries out of Concord. Right now, I'm going to discuss my testimony of a trafficking attempt by an occultist, and I'm also going to discuss some international and national cases that have involved occult elements. So in 2012, I began a sex career. And one of the things that kind of weighed on me about it was I couldn't date with a clean conscience. So around 2017, I was on Craigslist and I stumbled across an ad placed by an illicit masseuse. And the ad read that you could come over for a massage or come over just to hang out. So I thought that she would be a good partner for me. We could work together, you know. I reached out to her and I made plans to visit her. And at the time I wasn't driving, so I had one of my friends drop me off. So we had a good visit and got to know each other a little bit better. I was kind of hoping we could begin a romantic business partnership. I spent the night with her. The next day, I noticed men were coming in to her residence and peering through the doorway that I was behind and leaving. And I didn't really think nothing of it. We shared a pizza together that I bought and I took off. So after I did further research into her name and massage business, I discovered not only was she a masseuse, but an herbalist. And a few weeks passed and she didn't say much. I'd enjoyed our time together and I pestered her to come over. She eventually told me that I could. When I was getting ready to come over, I contacted her on the phone to discuss the details. And she was acting like a completely different person. She was being very pushy and telling me to rush. I was going as fast as I could. When I arrived, she eventually calmed down and we enjoyed each other's company. But before very long, our conversation turned a little bit strange. She pulled out a bag of lingerie and told me, I bought these for you. I wasn't sure if she meant for me or to wear for me. She told me at one point, I am your mother. I am your sister. I was beginning to get nervous. She told me she had a Kabbalah. And if you don't know what that is, it's a spiritual book that discusses magic and other things, kind of similar to any religious book. And she gave me a foot massage. And she played a vulgar pop song referencing working. And she was trying to use the lyrical content to encourage me to clean her bathroom. She did something with my arm and asked what my astrological sign was. She told me Paula Abdul was a Cancer like myself. She moved a cigarette up and down my arm and body. I thought this was some sort of kink thing. After I Googled it, once I was back home later, I realized that the cigarette behavior, some believe, is a way of casting a love spell. She said that her friend was coming over the next day. I barely knew her and didn't want to meet her friend, so got a little nervous again. I decided to call my friend to pick me back up. And at this point, it was around midnight. My friend had been sleeping. She told me that she had placed a curse on my phone that would make him unreachable. So I persisted in my attempts to contact him. Eventually he woke up and he was a little bit angry, but he agreed to come and get me. So she then told me that she had a shotgun and threatened to shoot me. I was pretty scared. She lived in a low income area, about a 40-minute drive from my place. I didn't want to be on her streets at night alone. So I figured she was bluffing about shooting me, so I decided to stay put. And she begged me not to leave. She said she was in love with me. I laid down on her bed. She cut her light off. I got worried again. She hovered over me in the dark and moved her hair to where it was covering her face, performed a sexual act on me. When I noticed my friend was outside, I ran out the door and got into his car, and he took me back home. And in the weeks afterwards, I felt something was very wrong with me. After I researched her further, I discovered that she had a record with the North Carolina DOC for breaking and entering, kidnapping, and assault. And there's no longer a history of this record on the NCDOC webpage. So after I got back home, I felt kind of tainted and edgy and insecure. And I would try to read my Bible for relief. And every time I read it, it read different than I had in the past. It was almost angry. I kind of felt like I was experiencing God's wrath, and I was very low and kind of horrified spiritually. And sometimes I would try to say my prayers to Jesus, and in my mental image, it was as though I was saying prayers to her, or that God wasn't listening to me. And as time passed, all that kind of eased. It wasn't too long after that, I got some threatening text messages from an anonymous number, and I don't know if they were her or not, but it's possible. So that's pretty much what happened with me.
No, it takes a lot to share something like that. So I think it takes a lot of courage and bravery to share. So I appreciate you being willing to share.
Yeah, it took me a little while to kind of like open up about it, because like, I would try to tell people about it and they wouldn't really focus on, the bigger parts of the story, like the real life threats, like threatening to shoot me, and us both being sex workers and whatnot. And I mean, also I neglected to mention she was wanting me to live there and like live off of peanut butter sandwiches, and I'm just thinking, well, I already had a place to live, you know.
Yeah.
Crazy. But yeah, the thing was, people would just focus on like the witch part and be like, well, ha ha ha, a witch, a witch. And it's just like, there's so much more to it than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there by chance a way for us to pause the recording for a minute? Is there a way to do that?
Let me see. Yeah. Okay. So I don't believe I gave her the chance since we had to restart this video. Hannah, why don't you talk a little bit about Present Age and what you do?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So my name is Hannah Arrowood, and I'm the founder and executive director of an organization called Present Age Ministries. And we exist to combat the sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking of specifically teen girls. And so for me, it's a very no one gets into this world because they think it's going to be a fun job. Let me tell you that it's you are called into this work, and you do it because you know that there's a calling. And so for me, my faith is the driving force behind everything that I do. It's both personally and professionally. And so getting into this work, I knew there was a clear call from the Lord to go. If I would have known what I was doing, I'm not entirely sure I would have said yes. But for me, it began to become very clear as I started this journey of Present Age Ministries. that my personal life, not only things that I was exposed to, but also things that I experienced, was not that far removed from the things that the Lord was calling me to combat. And there's one thing that I've learned is that where the enemy, we do have an enemy for those that may want to debate whether or not that there is good and evil. And if we believe in God, then we have to believe that there is somebody who is opposed to what the things that he is trying to accomplish on the earth. So when it comes to the fact that we have an enemy, Satan, who wants to thwart the plans of God, one thing that I've learned is that the place that we are attacked the most is the place that we have the most anointing and authority to carry out the will of the Father. And so that's a little bit about me. And I don't know if you want me to go into now about things of the occult, or if you want to go somewhere else first. So I'll let you tell me where you want to go, Nelson.
Sure, take it away.
So I was very in my personal life at pre-Present Age Ministries, there was direct exposure to the satanic occult. My father, who was a pastor, actually made a decision and was involved and had an affair with someone who was in a satanic cult. And so from that experience, without going into a lot of details, what I can tell you is that now 25 years removed from that, is there's a clear reality of that, having a front row seat to see the tactics and the schemes of the enemy, and having an ability, because of personal experience, to expose those tactics and schemes. And so when it comes to things like manipulation and control and intimidation, those are all evidences of things that those that are involved in the occult, those that are involved in witchcraft and black magic and all of these things, those are just common practices. Those are common techniques and tactics that are used to maintain secrecy, to maintain control, to maintain fear. And we have to be aware of that. And when it comes specifically to the intersection of human trafficking and the occult, what I can tell you from personal account is that those that are required to engage in sexual rituals, satanic ritual abuse is what SRA is, that is clearly, by definition of the law, a form of exploitation and trafficking. That's not necessarily going to be what's presented. That's not necessarily going to be what's disclosed, because oftentimes what we know is that those that are victimized, they don't have an understanding that what is happening to them is even wrong, or that it is even breaking a law or abuse. And so we've got to be aware as a community to recognize what it is, and then how to identify it, so that we know how to respond appropriately. And I think that's just something that's so critical for us in the community to recognize that it is happening. One, recognize that there is satanic ritual abuse happening. There is occult practice happening in your community, in your city. And if you don't believe it, let this be your wake-up call so that you no longer are walking in ignorance unintentionally. It is happening. And the rate of victimization and the reality of what happens to those victims is something that we cannot ignore. We have had not only personal accounts and personal stories and working with people and individuals, but also professionally at Present Age Ministries and working closely with law enforcement, have actually uncovered and disclosed where people are setting up as though they're running a church, and trafficker is said pastor, and oh, you have to do this or you have to do that in order to be able to tithe to this church. Those are actually structures and strategies and ways that these people operate. And so we have to know that. We have to understand that that's something that is taking place. And that's staying on just the manipulation side of it. That's not even getting into the fact of, like, their sacrifices are real, torture is real. All of those things are forms and methods in which the occult operates. And it's a reality, and we have to recognize that the truth and not turn a blind eye to those things.
Right. Yeah. I'll tell you, I mean, by some of the stuff that I uncovered, it just really shocked me.
Yeah.
So going into a little bit of that, I'm sure everybody kind of remembers, at least if you were around back then, the daycare satanic panic from the 80s and the 90s. I started covering this one, but now I think we're recording it, so hopefully don't have to discuss it again. But there was a growing belief back then that child sex abuse was more rampant than ever in America, and potential predators could be anywhere, and daycare centers often found themselves at the center of these controversies. The first case heard about concerned daycare operator Debbie McQuan and her husband Alvin. They were accused of abusing the children they cared for by Mary Barber, the children's grandmother, who allegedly had a mental illness. Mary claimed the McQuans were prostituting the girls, filming child pornography, torturing the children, and making them watch snuff videos. Barber reportedly told the children what to say should they be interviewed, and also implicated the McQuan's friends, Scott and Brenda Niffen, and Scott's mother as being involved. The Niffen's two sons supported the young girls' abuse testimonies. With the level of paranoia, exaggerated claims, intense interrogation techniques, and spotty convictions, the daycare scandals had a similarity to the Salem witch trials. Gerald Amaral was convicted in 1986 of rape of a child which had left no visible marks or detectable injuries. There were claims that he had punched a butcher knife into the rectum of a 4-year-old. Superior Court Judge Isaac Borenstein said every trick in the book had been used to get the children to say what the investigators wanted. After serving 18 years, Amaral was released on parole on April 30th, 2004. Amaral's sister and mother were also convicted of charges brought against them in a separate trial, and they were released from prison after their charges were found to be faulty in 2005. And, you know, there's so many of these. But to close out daycare centers for this seminar, in 1991 in Oak Hill, Austin, Texas, daycare owners Fran and Dan Keller were accused of abusing multiple children. The children told investigators they had been served blood-infused Kool-Aid and were forced to perform sexual acts on tape involving adults and minors. They described the Kellers as wearing white robes and lighting candles prior to the abuses. These claims started small and escalated to mentions of animal abuse, chainsaw decapitations, and cemetery plots. The children went on to state they had taken plane trips with the Kellers to places like Mexico, where they were allegedly abused by soldiers. Believed the Children, an organization which had rose to prominence amid the daycare panic mass hysteria, gathered information, and the children were questioned by counselors and parents. Fearing the results of a daycare trial of this nature, the Kellers fled the state. The children were diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. During a 6-day trial, the child who had made the original claims told the courtroom that she had been coached on what to say and that no actual abuse had occurred. An emergency room physician testified during the original trial that he had seen 2 tears in the girl's hymen, but during a new trial in 2013 said he was mistaken. After their convictions, the Kellers faced 48 years in prison. In the fall of 2013, Fran Keller was released on bond after it was found the Kellers did not have a fair trial. In January of 2017, the case against both of them was officially dismissed, and in August of that year, they got awarded $3.4 million for the time they had spent on the wrongful convictions. So, seen a lot of that in the 90s, a lot of concern about daycare centers. I'm sure there's been plenty of instances where children have been sexually abused at daycare centers, but as far as, you know, rituals and satanic abuse and whatnot, I don't know about all that. as far as they go.
I think it's we always, without having firsthand account or knowledge of those things specifically, I can't speak directly to those specific stories, but what I know is that there is a systematic structure in place that supports the abuse of children at lengths that we will never, I think, comprehend and fully understand. And without getting in and hopping on every conspiracy bandwagon, and without every, some things seem so far-fetched for us to believe until you talk to somebody who's lived it. And then you're like, wait a second, maybe there's more to what we realize than that. And I think that's the point where when you have the opportunity to sit and talk with people who've lived it, experienced it, can talk about things that are directly tied to occult rituals and occult abuse, then it changes your understanding and your filter and your frame of reference for understanding what is even possible. And that's just the bottom line.
Oh yeah. So many experiences out there that it's hard to deny. I mean, some of these are just mind-boggling. So with trying out this recording on Zoom, what I'd like to do is make sure it's working right and saving. So I'd like to save this recording here that we've been doing and see how that works, and then start a new one. We should be able to stay live with each other throughout this.
So one of the things that I would just want to say to people, first and foremost, I think because of experience that I have been able to walk through, and personally, I've understood the power of forgiveness and the power of letting go. And I think anybody who's experienced any type of horrific things that have been connected to in any way, shape, or form to the occult, I think first and foremost is recognizing that coming to grips with the reality that it wasn't your fault, and that there is shame and that is not yours to bear. And so when you're able to then process through that and truly walk through a process of forgiveness, it becomes the catapult that leads to your healing. And I think that what I've seen so often is that there is such deep-rooted anger and such deep-rooted betrayal, which is justifiable, and having to work through that and process through that. But then on the other end of that is, then what do you do with it? Because if you hang on to it, it literally can destroy you from the inside out. And so my encouragement would be to anybody that is watching that is that if this is something that you have been connected to or you have been exposed to, that there is a way out. First and foremost, I think one of the things that I had to come to grips with in the process of all of the exposure was, one of the things that was communicated is that you can never get out. Once you're in, and there's no way out, right? And that's a lie. That's just a lie. And so there's always a way out. And so that if someone is looking for that way out, to know that it exists, and there's people out here who, one, understand, who, two, believe that there is hope, and that hopefully that can give someone hope on the other side of it, to know that there is a way out, and that there is freedom from this, and that whatever someone has told you otherwise, they're lying to you, and Jesus has final say, and what they've said is not final. And so I would just hope that would bring some encouragement to someone, to know that they don't, the people in the occult and the people who have oppressed them don't get the final say.
For sure. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Hannah.
Absolutely. Hopefully we can do it again.
Sure. Have a great evening.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye. All right, everyone. I am back with more human trafficking in the occult. I was joined by Hannah Arrowood earlier on Zoom. We were unable to get Facebook Live to work properly, but we had a great discussion. I shared my testimony Now I am continuing on with discussing national and international cases of human trafficking and sexual abuse that have involved occult elements. In the conversation with Hannah, I discussed the satanic panic surrounding daycare centers in the 80s and 90s. I'm going to move on with discussing witchcraft's association with human trafficking in Africa. So, due to the culture of the continent and their religious beliefs, there's a lot of witchcraft fears inside of Africa, and it was believed that through social advances, witchcraft in Africa would dissipate. But the ugh, colonization and Christianity would come to the continent and fears would subside. That's what people hoped. But nowadays, the controversy surrounding witchcraft in Africa remains stronger than ever. More than half of all respondents to a Gallup poll in Africa indicated they believed in witchcraft. And on the continent, the beliefs transcend mere superstition and affect Africa's government, healthcare, and other institutions of society. In 2009, in Tanzania, over 50 albinos whose body parts are believed to be useful in magic rituals were killed. There's also a belief in Africa that albinos are cursed. Witch doctors in the area believe the body parts can attract good fortune and money. In African culture, when one is fingered as a witch, there's little hope for them. The community steps in to exorcise the evil, oddly enough, through bad practices of their own. Rapes, starvation, violence, imprisonment, and more are employed as tools to drive the demonic or occult influence out of the practitioner. There is a recent belief within Africa that child witches are on the rise. Where did it come from? Harry Potter? Innocent children are being condemned as witches by this paranoid society and left to endure these abuses and survive in whatever way they can on the streets. African children are often trafficked for their blood to be used in juju magic. Now, the occult belief system known as juju plays a role in human trafficking, specifically in Africa. Juju is a folk magic of West Africa that has a wide range of concepts. Juju can almost be thought of as luck or karma, and there can be good or bad juju. The threat of bad juju is used as an intimidation tactic within human trafficking. Within West Africa, oath swearing while under duress from juju is used to enslave a victim spiritually and mentally, allowing the occultist trafficker to manipulate their victims into submission. During this oath swearing, the victim will commonly be asked to disrobe and lie down. One victim, identified only as Tacumbo, says that after laying down, her face was covered with a red cloth and her left breast was gripped firmly as she felt a needle penetrate her chest. After regaining her sight, she saw that her nipple was bandaged and there were marks around her areola. After her pubic hair was removed, the end of the ritual involved her consuming liquor and swearing an oath of allegiance to her madame. Following her indoctrination, two more victims were sworn in. Sometimes victims are told to bring in menstrual stained underwear to give to the priest, who also removes their pubic hair, toenails, and has them make an oath over an animal's blood, typically a chicken, that they will remain in compliance. Through this exchange, the priest is given the power to punish the women who disobey no matter where in the world they reside. Tacumbo's priest warned her not to break the oath by showing her photographs of the deceased and the deceased who disobeyed. After Tacumbo was deported from Italy back to Nigeria by Italian authorities and had a marriage, she was unable to have a child. She visited a priest for cleansing and said this changed her. Even 4 years after the ritual, Tacumbo can feel a biting sensation around her nipple. She relays that a fellow victim has developed keloids around her breast and can no longer feed milk to her infant. Sometimes it feels like the area around my nipple is on fire, Tacumbo says. The supposed spiritual effects of breaking the oath weigh heavily on a victim's conscience and lead them to believe a life of sexual submission and compliance is preferable to going against a religious custom. Within this belief system, if they reported their abusers to the police or did not pay their traffickers, they would become violently ill. This incident took place in Benin City, Nigeria, which is oftentimes an African trafficking victim's induction to the lifestyle before they arrive in Europe. Annually, thousands of Nigerian women are sent to Europe to work as prostitutes to pay down forced debts going on as high as $50,000. They are lucky if they even make it to Europe, as the trek involves a 3,000-mile journey by pickup truck, motorcycle, or minivan and takes months to complete. While on this journey, the migrants are also vulnerable to other traffickers who may beat, rape, or force them into hard labor. In 2016, over 11,000 Nigerian women journeyed across the Mediterranean to Italy. Out of those 11,000, 8,800 are working as sex slaves. More than 80% of African sex trafficking victims come from Benin City in Edo State, which is home to many voodoo shrines and temples that, from the outside, resemble Christian churches. Recently, the northeast region of Nigeria has seen a surge too. There is a stigma within Nigerian culture against menstruating women. The menstruation process is associated with death and illness, and menstrual blood is used in black magic rituals. Now, the fear of confronting within that culture or even discussing ritual magic is one big factor in why there are so few human trafficking convictions in Africa. Continuing on about Africa, Josephine Amayu, a London based nurse, was convicted of arranging travel for sexual exploitation and perverting justice. Known as Madame Sandra to her victims, she'd been accused of trafficking 5 Nigerian women, forcing them to drink blood and eat chicken hearts while they swore an oath to never make a report to law enforcement. The victims were held in a debt of £38,000 for a 4-week trip across the Sahara to Tripoli, Libya. Once there, they would board inflatable rafts for a voyage across the Mediterranean. After police were alerted by a brothel owner who found suspicious paperwork on one of his workers, German authorities launched an investigation. Amayu was later arrested at Heathrow Airport in August of 2017, charged as the ringleader of a massive human trafficking operation. Amayu was the first British national prosecuted for offenses under the Modern Slavery Act for trafficking victims from outside the UK. So, that's a little bit about trafficking in Africa and how it has ties to the juju that they do down there. Pretty interesting. Um, Another case to gloss over. I'll let you know when I get done. I will be dumping my references, and I'll also be dumping a video that I made of my attempted trafficker confessing to having been a Craigslist masseuse and a witch. Um, so look forward to that at the end of the broadcast. I'll also be uploading part one, which was with Hannah Arrowood. Great conversation. My cats are going crazy. Please overlook them. So continuing on, one case I couldn't find much on it as far as an actual news article, but I did pull it out of a reputable reference work. In 2009, 4 Mexicans and a Guatemalan were prosecuted in federal court for moving several women from Mexico and Guatemala to Los Angeles to work as prostitutes. They intimidated and made death threats against their victims and their families, and utilized witch doctors who would take the women's locks of hair and use them as part of curses against them and their families. So that is pretty interesting and tragic, really. Just the way some of these groups institute control. Um, let's see here. What to discuss next? There was a collective known as the Kigwelly Sex Cult that operated in Western Wales. Colin Batley was the sex high priest, and he was leading the operation behind regular looking Welsh homes. Um, Nobody suspected a thing. Batley would wear a hood while performing his abuse and could call children to his side with the click of a finger. The cult derived many of its beliefs from famed occultist Aleister Crowley's book, The Book of the Law, which was found laminated inside of each member's house. The book included phrases such as, "Let all chaste women be despised," and "Prostitution is to be admired." Children obeyed Batley's commands out of a fear of angering gods. Batley was said to keep vicious Rottweiler dogs. A victim who goes by the alias Annabelle Forrest says that she was forced to watch her mother. Oops, my notes dropped. Just a moment. Okay. Annabelle Forrest said that she was forced to watch her mother have intercourse with Colin Batley at the tender age of 7. Once she reached 11, Batley raped her, and it wasn't long before he was having her engage in group sex. "I was a schoolgirl by day and a sex slave at night," she says. She gave birth to Batley's son at 18 and was forced into prostitution, with all of her earnings being taken by the cult. It astonishes me that we lived in the small cul-de-sac entitled "The Devil on the Doorstep." Well, I'm sorry. this, it astonishes me that we lived in that small cul-de-sac for so many years and not one person saw anything that gave them cause for concern, she added in an interview with the National Business Times. Forrest released a book on her ordeal entitled "The Devil on the Doorstep: My Escape from a Satanic Sex Cult." A second unnamed girl said that sex with him was a test. If I did not pass, I would go to the abyss. A third victim stated she was having sex on film at the age of 16. One of Batley's neighbors, John Wheatland, said that he once saw a tween done up like a film star who offered him sex. He said every night he could hear sobbing coming from the home. Batley's son Damien died in February of 2008 after accidentally hanging himself during a sex act. The incident was filmed on his mobile phone. Colin Batley received a minimum 11-year sentence with the possibility of life, while 4 other members of the cult were charged with various offenses relating to sexual abuse of children, receiving sentences ranging from 3 to 12 years. Shocking. Um, Continuing on, in Mexico, Nason Garcia, pastor of the La Luz del Mundo Church, was charged with 26 felony charges, including human trafficking, production of child pornography, and rape of a minor. His father, who once led the church, Samuel Flores, was also accused of sex abuses spanning 1997 to 2004. The church had over 15,000 locations in 58 countries. The church viewed itself as a revival of ancient Christianity, allowing no leadership positions for women and a strict female dress code, and also not featuring crosses or other modern Christian imagery. California police say Garcia would pressure women into wearing fetish costumes and participating in sex acts, telling them that resisting would be going against God, while a co-defendant took photographs of the activity. Garcia is currently in jail on these charges and faces trial in September 2021. So this is a case that's still ongoing. Um, so, will the charges be substantiated at trial? That'll be interesting and just tragic. It's all around tragic. Um, Here's a popular one you may have heard about. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Joa Tejara de Faria, also known as John of God, was a spiritual leader in Brazil. He began performing healings in 1978 outdoors in a chair by a main road. Slowly but surely, more people came for healings, eventually in thousands daily. Eventually, he opened a center to do his work from, which millions flocked to. His center sold herbs and spiritual and magical artifacts. In 2013, he found the new level of fame through a visit from Oprah Winfrey and subsequent documentary. In 2018, allegations of rape, sexual abuse, pedophilia, and trafficking children arose against him. Sabrina Bittercourt, leader of the organization Koan, which helps women report sexual assault by religious leaders, claimed Devaria was farming children in Brazil by holding young women at remote farms for reproduction purposes, then selling the offspring to childless couples. Bittencourt claimed she spoke to women in 3 different continents who attested to buying babies from John of God. Bittencourt claimed Faria frequently targeted poor women ages 14 to 18 for the reproductive purposes, offering them money to live inside mines or farms in ages of 10 to 14, in positions of sexual servitude. Skipped a line. 10 years after giving birth, the mothers were allegedly murdered. Faria's own daughter, Dalva, even implicated her father, claiming he raped her between the ages of 10 to 14 under the pretense of mystical treatments. According to her, after she was impregnated by one of his subordinates, he beat her until she had a miscarriage. Firearms and large amounts of cash were found within one of his dwellings. A day after being labeled as a fugitive, DeFaria turned himself into authorities on December 16, 2018, stating, "I surrendered to divine justice, and as promised, I now place myself in the hands of earthly justice." On December 19, 2019, he was convicted and sentenced to 19 years and 4 months for 4 rapes. He still has other pending charges related to the allegations against him. So, I'm going to be right back. I'm going to get a cup of coffee and going to discuss some more cases. All right. I'm back. So, here's probably the most interesting thing that I came across personally. Um, I have a friend who has told me some things about cartel trafficking, and so this whole case, um, it really shed a little bit of light on that for me, and I found it just fascinating. I'm sure you will too, especially with the way that it ends. Los Narcoticos de Satanicos was a cartel cult which emerged in Central America in the 1980s. Led by Adolfo Constanzo alongside Sarah Aldrete, Los Narcoticos gained infamy in the criminal rankings. Constanzo became a witch doctor, utilizing black magic within their criminal enterprise. The magic he practiced was a variety, combining Haitian voodoo, the Congolese Palomayambe, and Santeria. In the beginning, he used the blood and body parts of snakes, chickens, lion cubs, dogs, and goats to practice his dark arts. In due time, he began digging up human remains and using them in a cauldron to craft brews with. Sarah eventually took on the role of high priestess. The two purchased a compound within the Mexican desert, Rancho Santa Elena, which would become known as the Devil's Ranch. Around this time, Constanzo would begin kidnapping and killing young men to utilize their body parts to practice his dark arts. Mark Kilroy, a medical student from the University of Texas, vacationed to Matamoros on spring break alongside three of his friends. He spent the evening of his arrival drinking and socializing, and eventually decided to urinate in a secluded corner. He was never seen alive again. On that evening, Constanzo had sent some of his foot soldiers to prey on the local bars for vacationing American tourists. Mm. Kilroy ended up being the unlucky victim, being brought to Rancho Santa Elena and stripped, bound, and gagged in a barn. Kilroy was beaten, tortured, and raped by the gang. Kilroy put up a struggle, which will perhaps explain why he was treated so savagely. While trying to escape, he lost his life from a well placed machete blow to the back of the neck by Adolfo Constanzo. His body was mutilated, eviscerated, and used for Constanzo's occult practices. Kilroy was a well to do American man from a good family, and his disappearance was investigated. In 4 weeks' time, Mexican law enforcement discovered the ranch and Kilroy's remains. His brain and spinal column were found inside of a scorched cauldron, alongside a horseshoe and a turtle. After the authorities made a thorough search of the premises, human remains of 14 others were found on the property. An arrest warrant was put out for Constanzo, who hid himself inside of an apartment in Mexico City. 2 weeks after going into hiding, authorities tracked him to the apartment and began a siege. Constanzo spent the time burning money on a stovetop and shooting at passerbys. He then ordered one of his subordinates to shoot him, ending his life. Sarah Aldrete was later arrested and sentenced to 40 years following a confession which was allegedly forced. Only two of the cult's entire membership eluded apprehension. Wow. A guy digging up body parts, putting a man's spinal column and brain in a cauldron with a turtle and a horseshoe. Mm-mm. That's pretty wild. What else? I'm close to being done with my cases. I believe this is the last one. Let me double check. Coming up. Yep. So, Word of Faith Fellowship. That's a church out of Spindale, North Carolina. That's my home state. Faced controversy in the mid 2010s after claims arose that they were trafficking their congregation members from Brazil. Let it be known, Brazil is the biggest source of foreign labor. Um, Andre Oliveira, at the age of 18, accepted a calling to migrate from his Brazil branch to North Carolina, allegedly having his passport and money confiscated by church leaders. He said he was forced to work 15-hour days, generally with no pay, which began with warehouse cleanings and escalated to working in local businesses owned by senior ministers. He says refusal to work often meant beatings and public shamings at church. An Associated Press investigation found that Word of Faith was streamlining young laborers from its two Latin American branches into the U.S. to its 35-acre compound in Spindale. In 2014, three ex-congregation members told an assistant U.S. attorney that the migrants were performing work for no compensation. After police reports were reviewed, the AP found that complaints of abuse had also arose multiple times about its Brazilian churches. Most of the men were forced to perform construction, and the females would perform babysitting duties and work in the church's education program for youth. Panning through interviews with over 43 former members, documents, and secret recordings, the Associated Press found evidence of Word of Faith congregants being punched, choked, and slapped in an effort to purify them. Jane Whaley, a former teacher, and her husband Sam founded Word of Faith in 1979. With Jane at the helm, the congregation grew from small numbers to over 750 followers in North Carolina and nearly 2,000 members internationally. Whaley and other higher-ups would visit the locations in Brazil frequently. Once there, Whaley would tell members that a pilgrimage to America would help improve their relationships with God, also remarking that the faith in Brazil was inferior. Some of the migrants say they were tempted into leaving by promises of college education and learning English, and others felt they had no choice in the matter. Oftentimes, the migrants would begin an American education only to find themselves unable to find time to study due to the work demands. Thiago Silva, who flew from Brazil to the NC branch for a seminar in 2001, claims the forced labor Word of Faith operates is a human rights violation. Silva says he was part of a group which worked alongside Americans, where the Americans would receive compensation while the Brazilians went without. Among other members speaking out, Silva said that the Word of Faith fellowship had tight control over their laborers' lives, telling them where to live, when to work, and even forcing some into arranged marriages with Americans so they could legally stay in the U.S. Dating outside of the church and its proposed partners was forbidden. Rebecca Mello, another Brazilian migrant, said she knew at least 5 or 6 Brazilian males who had moved to America under Word of Faith's blessing strictly with the purpose of marrying Americans. One young Brazilian couple was broken up under Whaley's suggestion, who told the male half it was God's will for him to marry one of her selected American females. Thiago Silva tells us more of Whaley's controlling nature, stating that he could only make telephone calls to his parents if someone who spoke Portuguese was listening in on the call. There's no free will, there's Jane's will, he says. Some parents in Brazil stated they were completely cut off from communication with their North Carolina based children. Elizabeth Oliveira, of no relation to Andre, said she was kept for days in a state of isolation at senior church members' Brazilian homes. With her pilgrimage to America sure to correct what church members described as bad behavior, Elizabeth was immediately put to work when she arrived in North Carolina at the age of 12. During the day, she assisted with the education program, while at night she babysat and sewed, often burning the midnight oil performing these tasks. After her 8th trip to North Carolina at 18 years old, she decided to leave the church, being told she would die on her own and go to hell. Anna Albuquerque claims she worked full time without pay for Word of Faith, teaching and babysitting. During her final trip when she was 16, she claims Jane Whaley and another church official spanked her with a flat piece of wood, calling her unclean and demanding during the 40-minute beating that she pray for it to come out of her. During her last 2 weeks as a member, she underwent forced Bible reading, threats of hospitalization, and blocked communication. Upon her return to Brazil, she ended ties with the church. When laborer Luis Perez arrived in North Carolina, he attests that he discovered 8 people living in a basement in a church leader's home. There was never any time to sit down. We worked like slaves, he said. Jay Plummer supervised remodeling projects for a church leader's business and also confirmed American workers were paid while Brazilians were not. Room and board was what they worked for, and they had no choice, he says. When they would vocalize hesitation about working, Plummer claims this would lead to trouble. Another victim, Paulo Barbosa, says that the church officials did not allow for snacks between meals and banned workers from television, music, and certain products. Speaking Portuguese was also forbidden. Anyone who spent time in a restroom for over 5 minutes was suspected of masturbation, leading to Jane Whaley instituting punishments. If any church member was suspected of having dreams of a sexual nature, they would be surrounded, screamed at, and shaken. Church leaders often referred to the forced labor as volunteer work. The construction side of the work was said to include remodeling interiors, including ripping out walls and putting up drywall inside of homes owned by senior church members and their families. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, the Brazilian immigrants cannot legally volunteer for profit businesses like the rental properties. In 2018, 4 members of the church in North Carolina were convicted of federal charges related to an unemployment benefits sting. 3 out of these 4 were pastors or ministers. Outside of the circumstances related to this, no other charges have been filed against Word of Faith officials. So, looks like I've only got one more thing left to discuss, and it's going to be Pizzagate. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I put a lot of work into this seminar. God bless you all. I hope that this seminar kind of opens up your eyes to the link between human trafficking and the occult and educates you and just, you know, perhaps makes you consider even further doing something about human trafficking because as my catchphrase kind of is, ending human trafficking begins with you. And it does, it begins with your concern, your actions. So, anybody watching this video or hearing about me, Nelson Jones, or Trafficking Insights, Hannah Arrowood, and Present Age, um, you know, just do your homework, check stuff out, and see how you can get involved. You know. Okay, so I will be right back, and then I'm discussing Pizzagate. All right, Pizzagate. So, in March of 2016, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, John Podesta, had his email hacked. This was during the 2016 election period of Trump versus Clinton. WikiLeaks published his emails that fall, and a vocal collective of the alt-right, conservative journalists, and conspiracy theorists began claiming his emails contained coded wording that hid widespread child sexual abuse and child trafficking behind communication about pizzas. Comet Ping Pong, a pizzeria on Connecticut Avenue in D.C., was alleged to be a location where the trafficking was occurring from. Edgar Madison Welch, a North Carolinian, drove all the way to Comet on December 4th, 2016, armed with an AR-15. After entering the pizzeria, he fired multiple shots in the door. Employees and customers fled once they realized what was going on. Edgar proceeded to spend roughly 20 minutes inside, searching the restaurant for an entryway into a basement, which he had read online was where trafficking victims were located. The theory was that there was some sort of dungeon down there. He exited the restaurant unarmed and was arrested. And he was then charged with interstate transportation of a firearm and ammo and assault with a dangerous weapon. In March 2017, he pleaded guilty and received a 4-year sentence. And in May 2020, he was released. Now, while he was incarcerated on January of 2019, Comet Ping Pong suffered an arson. The blaze was swiftly extinguished by employees and no one was injured. Now, while Comet Ping Pong was the most notable location discussed with Pizzagate, there were several others. Around that time, if you ran a pizzeria, you better not have any kids around. Um, Eastside Pies, based out of Austin, Texas, had one of its vans vandalized after falling victim to online harassment, alleging it had ties to the conspiracy. Eastside Pie's upside down pizza slice logo was alleged to be an Illuminati symbol, a triangle. A photo published on Facebook of the former mayor of Austin with staffers only fueled the fire for even more speculation. Critics also questioned published photos of children enjoying the pizza. The side of their building was also spray painted with graffiti. A New York pizzeria named Roberta's received death threats over the phone amid the controversy. On December 1st, 2016, a 24-year-old worker answered the phone and was told, "You are going to bleed and be tortured." The next day at 5 p.m., the restaurant received a call asking if they had any affiliation with a website which had published an article on Pizzagate. Some people online claimed Roberta's was one of the Clintons' preferred restaurants, who are confirmed to have dined there in 2012. Other DC businesses, such as Besta Pizza, which was 3 doors down from Comet Ping Pong, Little Red Fox Cafe, Politics and Prose, which was a bookstore, and Bistro Terrasol, faced similar harassment. On January 12, 2017, a man pled guilty to one count of interstate threatening communications. He had phoned Besta Pizza from Louisiana and told them to save the kids and that he would finish what the other guy, Welch, the Comet Ping Pong attacker, did not finish. Um, Michael Flynn, the son of the security advisor Trump appointed, was removed from his position on Trump's team after he was found to be spreading Pizzagate conspiracy theories on Twitter. His father, also named Michael, had shared news articles in the past which alleged Hillary Clinton had knowledge of a sex ring. And while initially the Pizzagate theory involved political officials, nowadays it's evolved into a broader, more general conspiracy theory that argues that there's a new world order or satanic cabal of elites operating globally to traffic children. In June of 2020, Pizzagate saw renewed popularity on TikTok, with Pizzagate views reaching over 80 million. So, Pizzagate, it was quite a time in history, and with the whole human trafficking and the occult aspect of it, people were saying all kinds of stuff. If you ever read Reddit back in that day, Reddit conspiracy, things of that nature, I mean, it was just a constant barrage of posts every day. And, I read things such as Hillary Clinton was sacrificing children to bail and just all kinds of stuff. But what a time to be alive it was. And you got to question, where did it really start? Obviously, with the publishing of John Podesta's emails, but how did it get off the ground initially? Um, was it a targeted attack by the alt right? Um, was it a bunch of conspiracy theorists online? That's how I became aware of the scandal. Who knows? But if it were not for the 2016 election, would Pizzagate have even happened? That's something to think about. Um, so one thing that is helpful to learn from Pizzagate is, you know, the damage that can come from spreading rumors. Um, and there's an aspect of Pizzagate that you can even relate to Jeffrey Epstein. Um, you know, on Facebook all the time I see posts and here's Jeffrey Epstein with Bill Clinton. That proves they're both child molesters. Stuff of that nature. Yeah, I find just about in a post Pizzagate world, just about anyone who has political connections or is wealthy or is famous can be a target for these sorts of outlandish claims. There's the whole theory of child sexual abuse running rampant in Hollywood, and getting to that community. Nowadays, post Pizzagate, you got the politics side of it. Um, but was there any truth to Pizzagate? I mean, I don't necessarily believe any children were being trafficked out of pizza parlors. Um, I do believe it's possible people speak in coded communication. Um, you know, I do believe it's possible politicians have had sex with children. As far as a collaboration of politicians and pizza parlors working together to traffic children, eh, I'm sorry, that sounds just a little bit out there. But all due respect to anybody that does, take Pizzagate seriously. It is definitely an issue that was worth exploring, but I feel like it damaged reputations for no good reason. And it also led to some of these businesses being, boycotted and threatened and whatnot. So that's the downside of, you know, conspiracy theories spreading hearsay and rumors like that. Um, you know, it can get people in some serious situations when people decide to act on their personal impulses that they've gotten from listening to those rumors. Man did 4 years in prison for doing his own little AR-15 investigation. So, yeah, don't jump off a bridge because your friends are. Don't listen to everything that people say. But nonetheless, this ends human trafficking in the occult. It has been a great event. Um, I'm so glad I got to discuss all these cases with you. I'm so glad I've got to share my personal testimony with you, and I'm also so glad that I had a wonderful collaboration with Hannah Arrowood. hopefully next time there will be no technical issues. They plagued the start of this event tonight, but I still enjoyed it so very much. I hope everyone learned a lot. Once this live video is off of Facebook, I am going to try to compile all of the videos into one big video, and then I will upload the full version of Human Trafficking in the Occult on to YouTube, and the link will be on Facebook. So thanks everybody for joining me. It was a great discussion and a great event. Thank you.